Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very much a warm welcome to this morning's session. I hope you're all well. This event has become almost a set diary date over the last 7 years, but this year is obviously going to be slightly different for all the obvious reasons. And what we want to look at is the key trends and hear from a whole range of leading operators today about how they see the future, how they see the challenges we were facing today, and what are the next steps. I think it's fair to say that every operator at the moment is probably trying to work on what is the right road forward, and what's the right steps they need to take at this time during this remarkably difficult year. We're delighted to be joined by a range of senior operators and experts to give us our views over the next 2 hours. We do promise to try to finish on 11 o'clock so you can escape to do other things. But you should have a packed 2 hours of information. Graham Smith, the Managing Director of AlixPartners, will be first up to present and giving his view of the marketplace. Graham will then be followed by Robin Mills, Managing Director of Compass UK and Ireland, who will talk about what he sees as the future and the future challenges we face. Simon Brown, the Director of Research, Office Research from CBRE, will then come and talk, and he'll be asking the question, have we really seen a structural change regarding offices? And actually, what will the demand of future office space be as we go into 2021, 2022, which is probably one of the most crucial discussions as we go. And then we'll be having a panel with Wendy Bartlett, Chief Executive of Bartlett Mitchell, Alistair Richards, the Chief Operating Officer of CH&Co Group, and Dean Kennett, the founder of Fooditude. And the aim of today is to try to answer, or at least to try to look at how we can answer some of the most key questions. Things aren't going to go back to as they were before. So what is the future? How will services change and how will the industry change? I'm not suggesting we can give you all the answers, but we can certainly start working towards those answers. So we've got a whole number of things to work through over the next 2 hours, as I said. We're going to start with a few polling questions just to see how you feel as we start. Lauren, can I introduce you to answer polling questions?
Yeah, sure. Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope wherever you are safe and well. And for many of us, it's the first day of 2.0 on lockdown. It is interesting for us to ask these polling questions, and we're very grateful for you to answer them. So first one up is if you could please indicate what part of the hospitality sector you're most closely involved with. Are you finance, operations, sales, marketing? Are you an owner, C-suite, bank, lender, a consultant, or are you part of the education industry? That's wonderful, thank you. So we seem like we have got a lot of advisors and consultants on, so thank you very much for being here. The other polling question that I'd love to put forward to you is really just to kind of set the tone for some of the discussions we're going to be holding today. Do you consider, well, where we find ourselves today, whether you believe that the hospitality industry will be back to pre-COVID levels, I beg your pardon, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and I hate to say never. Well, that is slightly positive. Majority is saying 2023. I know in recent conversations we've had worse than that, so thank you for sharing. Third one, just quickly, is that many believe that, especially now, business models will need to change for the future. Do you believe that this is true? Goodness. Well, that is a resounding yes. Thank you for that. And I'm sure that's something that we will be discussing a little bit later. And finally, something that's obviously very close to our hearts, we argue that food service can play an increasingly important role when you're wanting to re-engage your teams and bring people back to the office. Is this something that you also agree with? Well, again, that's fantastic. A resounding yes, a very small no. So thank you so much for that. We are definitely doing a bit of a hybrid model, and for the first time we have actually got a hashtag that we'd love you to use. So if you are able to tweet, and like me, you know what tweeting is, if you could please use the hashtag FSGR 2020, Food Service Growth Report 2020. We also have a Q&A function that you'll be able to see on your screen. So please feel free to ask questions as we go along. You're very welcome to do so, and we'll answer them as and when we are able. Thank you, Chris.
No, thank you, Lauren. Before we start, our thanks to RA Experience for hospitality hampers delivered to many of your homes yesterday. There's a new offer being offered by Compass, which I know Robin's going to touch on a bit later on during his session, but thank you to RA Experience for that. Now into the main meat of the session. Graham, can I ask you to come online so we can introduce? Hi, good morning, Graham. I think it's fair to say, look, the AlixPartners report is actually the brainchild of Graham. Obviously, this is all about 7 years ago. So welcome, and look, I'll hand over to Graham now. Thank you, good luck.
Great, thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it, and thanks to everybody for joining today, and you know, also the partnership we've enjoyed with Chris and team at EP for the duration of this project has been really valuable to us. So thank you for that. So in the session today, I'm going to reflect on what we've seen in the market over recent months, some of the impacts, some of the changes, and also looking forward as to the outlook and how that also feeds into the M&A market. And a lot of this will be drawing on some of the data and the reporting that the larger global groups provide. And of course, this session is intended also to focus on the independent part of the market. But you know, in times like these, it's helpful to draw that data from the larger global groups and take inference from that, and also from our experience from talking to people in the market. And I'd just like to welcome you all today, and thank you for joining this event. As Chris said, it's an annual event, and unfortunately this year it's having to be held virtually. We did harbour thoughts at one point we might be able to all be back together, at least in a socially distanced space, but unfortunately not. I'm Graham Smith. I head up the hospitality and leisure practice at AlixPartners, the global consulting firm. And through this crisis, we've been working with companies to help them resolve challenges with their funding, operational or digital issues, or even implement restructuring actions to ensure their survival in what's been unprecedented times. We did think about running the growth index again this year. The data would have been from pre-COVID times. The aim of that, really, the idea being to show the health of the industry heading into the crisis, just to demonstrate that this was a industry with a great future and one worth investing in to get through this particular crisis. On reflection and talking to a number of operators in the market, you know, with all the challenges that they were facing and you know, dealing with the restructuring and dealing with their teams, it wasn't felt that was the right thing to be doing right now. But we did feel as though it was helpful to have an event like this to bring people together and just to share experiences and some of the learnings that has come through this. So moving on into the presentation itself, just to provide some context of the impact of the crisis. We've got a share price graph here from the largest operators in the market, and see how they performed in recent times. And what we can see when we look at this chart is that share prices have fallen between 38 and 76% since March this year. Obviously, this is a significant impact on the value of these businesses, but not a surprise given the impact of COVID on the market as a whole. However, if we take this forward and look at the performance through 2019, we can actually see that after a reasonably tough start at the start of 2019, share prices had recovered well up until the impact of COVID. And if we look at the share price performance to the present day compared to the low point of 2019, in some cases, all that's happened since the impact of COVID is that companies have given back the gains they experienced through 2019, and certainly the value fall is lower than taking the high point pre-COVID. So I think what's clear from this is that the market, does expect a good recovery in these shares, and that the US market also is expected to perform more strongly than Europe, just given the exposure of Aramark and Compass to those areas. So given the crisis, how have we seen the largest businesses respond to this? And this actually feeds through into the independent operators as well. And we can see as we go through some of these announcements of what's happened, we can see the actions being grouped into four main areas, the four C's, if you will. First of all, capital. Significant levels of capital have been raised in the early parts of the crisis, equity capital, to enable the companies to have enough liquidity to survive closure periods and move through to more normal trading levels. Also, costs. Costs have been cut heavily in response to the collapse in revenues, a collapse in revenues particularly in certain subsectors. And the ability actually to be able to flex costs as that revenue falls is one of the keys to being able to survive a crisis like this. Government support has enabled more employees to remain connected to businesses through the furlough scheme rather than suffer immediate redundancy, which has obviously been a huge help. Cash. There's been a laser focus on cash in order to boost liquidity. This has involved switching off capex and also targeting working capital. So a real focus on cash as opposed to profit to ensure survival. And the final point is credit. So the borrowing that businesses have, their relationships with their lenders. And in order to secure more time and flexibility, we've seen companies engage with their lenders to secure extensions to their facilities and also gain more flexibility on their covenants, if you like, to create the headroom in order for them to trade through to more normal times. And all of these actions are intended then to create the platform that's in the best shape possible for when the revenues return. So what we've looked at on this slide is to consider when will revenues return. And what we can see is that actually it's a different picture depending on which subsector you're looking at. And on this table, we set out the varying impacts that we've seen and taken some of these estimates of the impact from the data produced by the largest companies, also the analyst report and the insight we've got from talking to people in the market. And what we can see is that sport and leisure, of course, has been the hardest hit. We've all seen the images of empty Premier League stadiums, and so that was shut down almost completely in the first lockdown. And as we look forward into 2021, then there's quite a variation in terms of how that might play out, and it's really reliant on the impact of an effective vaccine or even rapid testing in order to be able to bring people back safely into the venues. With business and industry, and we'll hear from others in the market and also the views of CBRE on their research around the outlook for business and industry. And we've seen a divergence there between the large conurbations like London, reliant on mass transit, and perhaps operations outside in smaller cities and towns around the country, and that recovering to a 10 to 50% closure rate through 2021, and that variation really being driven again by the ability to cope with the virus. With education, then, as we've seen in this lockdown, there's a real it seems a real commitment from the government to try and keep education open, which results in a better estimate in terms of the number of sites that will remain open through 2021. What we've seen is a bigger impact on tertiary and secondary rather than the primary part of the market. And while some of these venues are open, then maybe some of the ancillary revenues around some of the retail, again, if that's under restrictions, will be a greater impact in that tertiary and secondary education. And then in defence and healthcare, then these have been the two most robust sectors as we've gone through this particular crisis. And in healthcare, again, lots of demand for that, but as we have some restrictions, and that retail element around it has been impacted. But clearly that mix of revenues has played a big part on the way that people have traded through this crisis. And there's a poll at the start of the session where we looked at when people expected revenue levels to recover to where we were pre-COVID. We've also looked at this taking 2019 as the pre-COVID data, and looked at where do analysts expect the large global groups, when do they expect them to return to their 2019 revenue levels. And what we can see from this is that in each chart, the different coloured bars represent a different group, and then we've looked at what percentage of 2019 revenue they're expected to generate in 2020, 2021 and 2022. And we can see that obviously the largest impact in 2020, some recovery through 2021, but then actually in 2022, that's the year in which the analysts are expecting that these large global groups will get back to at or almost at their 2022 revenue levels, which is clearly encouraging. So what has been the impact? What have we seen in terms of trends and changes? And in the spirit of never wasting a good crisis, COVID really has accelerated a number of trends that we saw which were apparent before its impact. I just want to highlight some of these now. The first area is digital transformation. And this is the key to a number of the follow-on changes too. The need to reduce human contact, know what volumes are being managed, limit capacities, and be able to track and trace has led to an explosive growth in technologies to manage the booking, ordering and paying elements of the customer journey. And caterers need to adapt these technologies, and the clients have been actually pushing for them to be implemented, which I know has been quite a change than pre-COVID. Sometimes it's very difficult to get maybe clients to move quickly and accept that change. Other changes such as automatic rota systems, employee management technologies, these could all be implemented more quickly actually when the operations were closed. There's less disruption around change like that. As I said, the digital transformation has then enabled further trends to become more established. First of these is the option to deliver in food rather than prepare on site. And doing this effectively is greatly improved by fulsome adoption of apps and digital technology. The need to space out employees more has also meant that converting kitchen space to employee space can be beneficial for some companies. And with Just Eat and Compass, amongst others, investing in this space, we expect it to continue to grow. And another interesting aspect of this will be, does this shift enable caterers to be able to service employees either in the office or whilst they're working from home? And Chris mentioned the kind food gifts from Compass, having that delivered in readiness for a breakfast seminar. Personalisation has become more important as customers become more sophisticated and more aware of health and wellness needs. In addition, a move away from more buffet style provision and fully stocked shelves to in fact preparing what people want has actually have a benefit to food waste as well, which is a key focus. All of this is made easier with digital tools. And safety and compliance is at the top of the agenda for clients, and they need to know that their suppliers are up to the task and that they're sufficiently resilient. This may have the consequence of driving a shift from clients towards the bigger companies due to the belief that they have the capabilities and the scale to provide comfort in this area. So an important message that isn't lost on the independent operators, I know, in order to double down and demonstrate their capabilities in that area. So given this, what do we see happening to M&A in this sector? And after all, that is my day job. Well, we think that despite the disruption, the M&A activity will return. So why do we think that? Well, first of all, synergies. When revenues come under pressure, the need to be able to cut cost to protect margin becomes all the more important. And synergies, so when putting two businesses together and being able to reduce duplicated costs, really is a way to rapidly implement those cost savings. Safety. So volatility and risk, when that's present in a market, that can put a premium upon safety, which clients look for and which employees value, which tends to lead people to then look to add scale. And with scale can come diversity. We've looked at the impact of the crisis on the different subsectors, and it's had a different impact. So actually the ability to have a diverse range of revenue streams has also been valued. And the final point is specialism. So certain specialist niches have been more robust. We've seen around, kind of defense, education, healthcare. They've been more robust through this crisis. And that will, we think, increase their attractiveness. Again, may result in some of the bigger businesses looking to invest in those to fill out that niche, or indeed private equity returning to support businesses to grow in those areas. So thanks very much for your attention. And I hope that's helped to give you an overview of the market and where we might see M&A returning in the future. I'll hand to Lauren now.
Thank you very much, Graham. Robin, thank you. There you are. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Robin Mills, who is the Managing Director of Compass UK and Ireland. I think Robin is going to share some thoughts with us around, food service as an industry. We have had to and we continue to innovate. And despite the challenges, there are definitely opportunities for innovation and strong leadership. And I know this is something that Robin is going to share with us. So Robin, thank you very much. Over to you.
Hi, thanks, Lauren. Hello, everybody. You can see that I still haven't got over that terrifying moment to make sure the tech works. So we're perfectly this morning, a little blip there, but we're back on it. So delighted to talk to you all today. I hope you all had a good night out last night. I was looking at the screens this morning and the photographs of the city centres to see if I could spot any of my colleagues and friends. And of course, we are here in a strange moment. I also take my hat off to AlixPartners and to the EP team for having the foresight to pick this date. I will certainly be following their diary with interest in the future, and if ever there's a recommendation for sort of strategic vision, then today's the day. So well done to everybody as well. As you can see, I'm also back in number one son's bedroom. It's been a journey through the summer. That's not his banner, by the way. That's mine. I have spent the summer out and about in clients and in suppliers and farms and so on. But now it looks like we all have our wings clipped a little bit. More of that in a moment. Graham and the team asked me to offer some thoughts about the industry and about where we are. And I've called it Stepping Forwards, because despite all the various twists in the road that are happening in the UK in terms of government policy and latest rules, I still think that we are an industry that has stepped forward, and that the country needs to continue to step forward. And I think that's really the mentality that we need to have. I mean, things have changed so quickly. I know many of you have had to make changes over and over in terms of either your plans to return to work, or your plans to offer services, or your plans to provide food in different environments and so on. And it really has been an enormous challenge, a massive thrill in a sort of guilty secret way, but definitely a challenge as well. I feel like I couldn't have written this presentation last week. Maybe it'll be out of date tomorrow or by the end of next week. But these are the views that I have at the moment. The other thing to say is that there are some common themes that I'll talk about today, which Graham has just sort of shown on a very macro level. But maybe I'll show the sort of the human version and the sort of the people version, and maybe a little bit of the personal version of some of those big macro dynamics that Graham showed earlier on. And then I know there's a terrific panel as well lined up for later on in the session, and I'm sure those guys will have a more some similar and different views as well. I think overall it'll sort of give you some color for the way forward. The main point, I think, and the main reason I've talked about stepping forward, is that I see amazing innovation in the industry. I see amazing innovation inside my own business, but I also see that in terms of the competitor businesses as well, and right across the rest of the industry. And they're the really exciting part of the conversations with clients and with customers going forward. So I think in the medium term, I think people are in for a treat, but clearly we are at the moment in an industry in transition. So in order to give you some sort of personal thoughts, I'm just going to go back a little bit. And the question is, I'm going to show you a video that was an internal video that we used in Compass. And it was really to recognize the people that were responding and stepping up right across the industry. This is the Compass version. The question is, when was this video made? And let's talk about it after I've shown it.
It was a time of crisis, and our nation stood still. Hospitals were kept busy with so many ill. Offices fell silent and shops closed their doors. Restaurants and cafes had patrons no more. Sporting events cancelled and social life banned. Pupils kept home from school right across the land. At Compass, we serve food to brighten your day, and we create memorable experiences, come what may. When people want solutions, they turn to those they trust. This time was no different, as they turned to us. Our people donned their uniforms and PPE. Ordinary people, just like you and me. Our frontline teams gave their heart and soul. They threw themselves into every role, feeding doctors, nurses, armed forces and police. Those putting out fires and keeping the peace. Our cleaners, porters, security and ward hosts all worked where they were needed the most. Chefs, managers, service assistants and the rest. Across the country, our people were put to the test. When food was scarce and shelves were sparse, our supply chain colleagues came through for us. They formed an army of willing volunteers, sending care boxes to their frontline peers. We supported the vulnerable and those most in need, giving food to charity at exceptional speed. At Compass, we rise by lifting others through. With spirit and resolve, our people have held true. We want to thank them very much for everything they do. Their dedication and care have been admired. Their strength and resilience have truly inspired. Things will be different now. We'll help show our clients how. We'll continue our work with drive, because it's such a privilege to be alive. So, we embrace this new world with our constant theme. We are Compass. We are one team.
So that was the 15th of May. Feels like only yesterday, but it's actually 5 months ago. And we put that together really to recognize the thousands of heroes that were responding in thousands of different ways every day. And those days were an opportunity for us to really show our values and for the industry to really show their values and their flexibility. And right across all the different competitors, everybody responded in a very similar way. But 5 months have gone by since those very early days of needing to respond in different ways. And the important thing now, I think, is to reframe and to think about some of the themes that Graham highlighted in his presentation earlier on. Because the future, I think, in terms of our industry now, is about agility and about flexibility and about personalization and a more, and if you like, a lighter approach to how we serve even better food and even better experiences to people in their various different locations. And I think that's the most important thing to bear in mind, is that when we come through the other side of this, and in a way we are already at the other side of this, then it is about better food and better experiences. And from what I've seen in terms of the competitors and what I've seen in terms of Compass, there is a real treat in store for customers and clients as innovation accelerates like it's never accelerated before. I mean, I'm quite a long-serving Compass person, 12 or 13 years, and I've never seen the organization move this quickly, and I've never seen competitor organizations move this quickly as well. So these are just some of the examples, and you'll see these in the various marketplaces. Constellation is an amazing story that actually began at the beginning of the first lockdown, where we used Levy employees, the sports people who should have been working at the Premier League football grounds and tennis tournaments of the UK, to actually support in the hospitals, in the big new demands in healthcare, and that has now become the flexible way that we provide people across all the different sectors, and we'll be approaching 1 million hours in Constellation in the next week or so. Fido is the health and nutrition app that allows people to order food and then manage their own delivery and their menus in their locations. Many of you will have known Fido. They've been operating particularly in London for 3 or 4 years, and they help us provide a more flexible approach to food and nutrition management and personalization in office locations particularly, but they've also started some delivery to home. Curb was a recent announcement we made about those guys are very innovative, contemporary, very authentic food offers. They curate a number of brilliant startup companies and help really bring them through and actually launch them into the wider world. So they have a great social mobility approach as well to their partners, and they're a really wonderful way of providing terrific, authentic food, but in a much more flexible way. And then you'll see we sent out some of the breakfast this morning from RAX, but there's a whole range of different things that those guys do, and I know we're not alone, but it is part of providing even more brilliant experiences and even more brilliant food to people wherever they are. Wendy and I were talking earlier on about the support to the recovery that our industry can bring, and having really exciting menus, very variable experiences, but at a high level for people who are in work or at home or wherever they may be. For conferences like this, I think is going to be an enormous step forward for the UK as well. The common theme, I think, is about people and the future. I think even in that tech-orientated, flexible, agile business kind of way will remain about the people. The industry is maybe a people business even before it's a food business, and it's the people who will still be the future. We relied on them in the early days to help us respond quickly and help support people in vulnerable and different and varied places. But now we need their contribution more than ever. We need We need their ideas, we need their collaboration, we need their enthusiasm, we need their spirit. And my suggestion and request to everybody here is to increase the level of engagement, increase the opportunity for people to contribute, increase the chance for them to bring their ideas, increase the chance for them to get their innovation and their energy into the future. And this is the area where I think we really should be investing as well, because the people from the industry are the ones who've made our industry such a wonderful experience for our guests and customers, and they will do the same again. So invest in your people, be a real living wage payer if you're not already. Support apprenticeship schemes, show people genuine careers through our industry, even in and out of different organizations, even client side and supplier side. But let's really look after our people and let's help them deliver for us in the future. I mean, just to sort of a couple of personal stories. I mean, given an audience who doesn't like to talk about themselves, Graham and Lauren asked me to just share a couple of personal reflections. I mean, you know, my sort of my real secret around here is that I've actually found it a real privilege and a real motivation to be a leader in this industry at this time. I mean, sure, it's been hugely challenging, but almost compared to anything I've done before, the chance to be a leader and to reinvent the future, to reinvent the business, to respond quickly and to all those adrenaline fueled decisions that were made at the beginning, and now to think more strategically about the future is actually, I think, the most privileged thing that I've done, and actually the most rewarding thing. Of course, it's been the toughest, but it will ultimately, I think, be a time that I look back on and think, you know, I'm just so pleased I was in that role at that time. I think the way I felt about the early days of the COVID crisis when it first struck was that a lot of the decisions that came were very complex. They were a mixture of sort of the emotional and the commercial, the short term and the long term, the strategic and the operational, and it was very difficult to sort of unpick them as they were coming at you absolutely thick and fast. And slowly a picture began to emerge about what was going to be important, and looking after people and clients was clearly the most important thing in the early days. Graham talked about providing financial stability, which is obviously also vital. But in the early days, there were very quick adrenaline fueled decisions, and everybody was weirdly hooked on that kind of approach. I think since then, and the two sort of the video and the slide later on about innovation, I think demonstrated that we did move in some odd sort of seamless way from those very early days about sort of crisis management into a longer term, more strategic style of decision making. And that's, I think, has been an important part of leadership, has been the ability to reframe, the ability to connect some of the dots, to join up some of the patterns, to reflect on some of the conversations and experiences, and then say, hang on a second, I think we're in a different phase now. I think for all that was challenging and difficult and strangely rewarding, it's kind of gone now and things have changed. And I think we are in a new frame now. I mean, my personal reflection was that the announcement that made a big difference to our industry was actually the one that came about a month ago, when Boris said, "Don't come to work," and said, "Don't trial the crowds at sporting events," and sort of Rishi's first attempt at the support scheme. I think that really took the wind out of many clients' plans to return and sort of push the light recovery back into the new year. We were starting to see plans of people rebuilding and returning, and it was that announcement, even really more than this recent announcement, which I think helped us reframe again and think differently about the pace of recovery and the areas of investment and the areas of expertise that we needed to build. I think the other thing which struck me throughout this, right from the very start, is the level of collaboration across the industry. I mean, many of us know each other for various bodies that we sit on and so on, but I think the level of collaboration and the level of sharing, I think, has been hugely important to everybody, ultimately to the benefit of people and to clients and to customers. I think the level of government contact has been, from my personal experience, it's increased sort of tenfold. And actually, whilst we might not have liked some of the directions that came out from the government, there has actually been an enormous amount of consultation backwards and forwards. And actually, I hope that the industry can maintain that level of connection with government bodies as we move forwards. So I think that's the change in the journey. I think, first of all, if you can find a way of feeling actually very lucky to have been in a role of influence and leadership during this crisis, in the long term, you will look back on it and say, I'm so pleased that I was able to lead people and make a difference and get things more right than wrong. It might not feel like that now. It might not have felt like that in the past, but I think it will feel like that in the long term for each of us. And secondly, the important capability of reframing and resetting and relooking about what the new agenda is and how to make the best of it, I think is still an important leadership attribute. So now let's have a look forward. When Graham asked me to do this, he also asked me to share some sort of perspective on the international business, and clearly in Compass we have many international colleagues, people who do the same job as me in different size businesses across the world. I tried to pick three that might give us both some clues and some warning signs. I did have the US on there, but I decided that even they don't know what's going on in there at the moment, so I leave them to it. But between New Zealand, China, and Europe, there are some interesting insights. If I sort of start at the right-hand side, I mean, actually, the European business, if I talk about the countries and then the sort of the food service approach, I think the big difference in Europe, even though they've been through the similar kind of journey to the UK in terms of lockdowns and outbreaks and so on, there's still a culture generally about people being at work, and so there hasn't been the same "don't go to work" kind of mentality or directives. I think the French now have said, we'd rather you worked at home, but everybody else is kind of given it as a guidance rather than as a rule. And the European culture is more about being at work. They kept their schools open for a much longer time than we did in the UK, and that also enabled people to go to work and stay at work. So there clearly was an impact, particularly on the business side of client sites. In terms of industry, not really affected. In terms of schools and hospitals, mainly open and mainly busy. But clearly the sort of the office environment was impacted, but nothing like it has been in the UK. I think the positive note is that where offices have stayed open, and many of them have, and some of them are still returning, that the volumes have been generally higher than they were pre-COVID. So, you know, what's at the back of that? Then maybe it feels safer to eat at work than it does at home. Maybe it feels better to eat with some colleagues than it does at home. Maybe it's just a question of not having to cook and prepare it yourself. But certainly we're seeing some improved volumes in business sites that have stayed open in Europe. Moving back, I'll go to New Zealand and maybe finish with China. So in terms of the country, New Zealand's obviously been held up in one way or another as the kind of the poster child of how to handle the COVID outbreaks well. They're obviously an island like us. I think the difference has been that they've taken a very firm grip of their borders. So their strategy was to eliminate it inside New Zealand and then to manage the borders forensically. So there are three things I think that they've done. Their border control and their isolation management, I think, is being ferocious. So that's really stopped outbreaks. They have a very compliant track and trace and high quality track and trace system. And they also have publicized the same protocols that we've used about washing hands and keeping space and so on. The businesses have been less affected. So I think in the sector that I talked about earlier on, business, that sector is probably still about 20% down. Everywhere else is pretty much life as normal. And life as normal goes on. I think the warning sign for that we can take from New Zealand is that their unemployment rate now, which has traditionally been below 4, yesterday was 5.5, and they anticipate 8 or 9%. So they do fear the recession that comes after COVID. But their businesses actually continue to perform well, and the Compass business in New Zealand is almost back to where it was before. They still have some crowds at sporting events. If you remember, they had the rugby, didn't they, at Auckland, I think, which was the first attended sporting event for a while around the world. And then the Chinese, again, are even further forward than New Zealand. They have strong border controls. The economy is actually benefiting from the fact that the Chinese are staying at home now and not traveling as much as they would have done. So the high street restaurants are showing double-digit growth. You can't get a table at some of the restaurants. They're queuing still sort of shoulder to shoulder in order to get great food. And the Compass business in China is about back to 98%, almost back to 100%. So ironically, particularly for Donald, they now call COVID the foreigner's disease. They think it comes in from the outside now, and maybe there's a sort of PR response there. But I think the other common theme across all countries is that some of the US and the UK banks, some of the tech companies are more cautious in people that they've got in the office. There is, and I see this as well, there are some clients from those sectors who have a sort of global perspective on the approach and the rules, and that can go right across the world and can slow the return to the offices down. But in general, I think the view, particularly from the Asian countries and the Australasian countries, is that businesses will return, maybe not quite to the same levels, but they will return. And at the heart of it is safe eating environment and really good food experiences. So then finally, just a word or two, in summary about the future of our industry. I mean, I firmly believe that the industry will enable recovery. It will be at the heart of recovery. I think it will be ultimately better for it. I think the food experiences will be amazing. I think people will have a treat in store when they do reconnect with our industry. And I have three things to say really to everybody who's joined this call by way of sort of request and recommendation. I mean, the first thing is, I'd really like us to do right by our people, invest in apprenticeships, pay the real living wage, invest in training, build careers. We are a massively socially mobile industry. We take people with very few skills and experience, maybe sometimes no skills and no experience, and we can turn them into absolute superstars that can support a family and can have wonderful careers in our industry. We need to be a bit more joined up about that, and we need to maybe put some of our investment and commitment into those journeys for our people. But let's reset our approach to people at an even higher level than we had before. Secondly, I mean, let's really speak with confidence. Let's talk about the critical infrastructure that we are. We're as important as the internet providers. We're as important as the roads. We're as important as the hospitals. We can't often be seen, but without us, then all these places stop. The police stations, the prisons, the offices, the hospitals, the schools, the universities, they all grind to a halt without us. And we should speak more confidently about being an absolutely critical infrastructure for the future. And then finally, a point I've made all the way through this presentation, remember, this is about being a better industry, not a smaller or less able or a different industry. It is about being a better industry, more modern, more contemporary, more brilliant food, greater careers, better experiences. And it's certainly a mantra that I hold inside Compass. And there's no reason why we can't hold as an industry. Whatever we do, let's make sure it's better than we did it before. Maybe it's more agile, or it's lighter, or there's less choice, or there's more choice, or however we do it, let's make sure that it's better than what went before. And even despite these challenges, then I don't think there's a reason why that can't be the case. So Graham, Chris, I'm going to leave it there. I'm very happy to take a question or two if there's time. And I'd really like to thank everybody for coming on the call this morning and listening in.
Robin, thank you. That was excellent. Really interesting. Look, I think was it beginning of November last year you took on the reins?
Yeah,
it's quite a first year, isn't it?
I had about 6 weeks. If you include Christmas, I had about 6 or 8 weeks, I think, before COVID struck. But I'm as I said earlier on, I'm super happy that I took on the role and feel like it was actually a really good thing.
I suppose my question is, how has it changed you? How has this year changed you as a leader?
You asked me the big question straight up, Chris, don't you? How's it changed me? I mean, I always knew that the important thing was to get the best out of people. I think what it reminded me of, particularly in the early days, is how even sort of the basics are absolutely vital, i.e. that people are fit and healthy, that they feel good about what they're doing, that they are motivated and engaged. I mean, you kind of take a lot of those things for granted when you're moving quickly and doing loads of things. But actually, I remember on some of those early calls thinking, God, I hope all the MDs are feeling A, healthy. I hope they're all feeling positive and optimistic about the future. I hope they've all kept their confidence. So some of those things that you sort of assume about people, I think it reminded me that you shouldn't take them for granted, and that you need to keep checking in that everybody's feeling their best.
What I've enjoyed about the presentations, both from yourself and Graham, is actually showing a roadmap out of this crisis. Because I think the last month people have felt quite down, wondering when are we actually going to get through this. Do you share Graham's viewpoint that by 2022 we'll be seeing a growth pattern again?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the sort of phrases I use is that I think from this point it's about the journey as much as it is about the destination. I mean, I know shareholders and analysts will be looking for that kind of point where they say, right, well, that company or that industry is back to the point that we left them 18 months ago or whenever. But I'm that's obviously a useful sort of totem pole. But actually, I think if people think about that too much, then the measures of success start to weigh heavily on you. I mean, actually, I think that it's all about from this point on. In fact, it was all about really from the 23rd of March or whatever it was, from that point on. And I'd say to people, don't forget it's the journey, not the destination, which is the relevant thing. It's what you do today and tomorrow, and new relationships that you build and new capabilities that you build, which is the success point, not necessarily just how the shareholders and analysts describe it. You see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. No, fair play. Final question I know from the audience is, obviously there's a big call out for a Minister of Hospitality, the government to appoint a Minister of Hospitality. Do you agree on that? Do you think there's a need for that, or do you think we're getting our message across well enough?
Yeah, no, I think we can get our message across better than we have done. I think we've worked hard, but it does feel like hard work. And you almost, I think my experience, particularly in the early days, you have to preface everything with a little explanation about how we fit in. I mean, there is a degree of humility in the industry, isn't it? Which is that I think it's something that we sort of all enjoy, but actually, it maybe just needs to move up a level or two, and I think those kind of ideas I definitely support.
Thanks, Robin. That was great. Thank you very much indeed for your time today. I'm sure everyone will enjoyed it. If you have any more questions for Robin, please post in the Q&A, and I'm sure Robin will try and answer as many as he can. We're now going to introduce Simon Brown from CBRE. Simon, can I ask him to join? Hi, good morning, Simon.
Hey.
And Simon's going to talk about the future of the office, which I think is probably quite a key issue for all of us. So welcome, Simon, and I look forward to listening to you.
I have to adjust my lighting a bit because I'm not used to working from home. Lockdown 2 has caused me a lot of problems. I'm just going to share some slides, and I'm scheduled to talk for around half an hour on this. And the presentation that I've got talks about a couple of things with relation to what the office demand will look like in the future. So that seems to be moving without me touching it, sorry. And the presentation is split into two distinct parts. Before I start, it's probably worth just introducing who I am and where I come from. So I'm Simon Brown, and I head our UK office research function at CBRE. And CBRE is hopefully a brand and a company that a lot of you are familiar with, probably mostly dealing with our facilities management side of the business, but we're predominantly known as leasers and agents on sellers or buyers of buildings, and offices really form a large part of our business. So clearly we have a vested interest in this, but I'm hoping that my presentation comes across as relatively impartial. The first section, as you can see from the agenda here, looks at the impact of COVID-19 on office demand. Now, what I'm not talking about here is the immediate short term. As the previous presentations have shown, and as you will intuitively know because you're living through it, COVID-19's impact on office usage and demand has been devastating. Effectively, in the very first lockdown, outlawing occupation of offices, sensationalizing it somewhat, and we're in a situation like that now. So I'm acknowledging that in the very short term, things are pretty poor, but I'm trying to look beyond COVID-19. We have to make an assumption that COVID-19 at some point will go away, or there'll be a vaccine, or it will be managed. So I'm imagining the longer or more medium term impacts. And there's a lot of research type stats in there. The second section is slightly different, and I'm trying to imagine what the new normal will look like for offices. So this should hopefully be interesting to you just in general in terms of what the office industry is thinking. So in terms of what your offices will look like as a user, but also hopefully as a supplier of services to them. So let's just start off on the first section and the whole reason why this presentation was pulled together. And this was something that I was predominantly talking through in September and October, but I first started thinking about the subject and pulling together information in May. And you can see here, these are a few headlines that I found when I was first writing it. The intention was that I would update these headlines to become more contemporary, but I decided not to. And the reason I didn't wasn't out of a sense of laziness or indeed an inability to find these headlines. In fact, the reason I kept them the same is just to show how little the story has moved. And the idea of the death of the office is still pretty much mainstream thought on this. The idea being that because we have been enforced working from home for so long, and to a greater or lesser extent, business has carried on as normal. Some people have loved it, some people have really hated it. But given that real estate is such a big cost for businesses, wouldn't it be better to spend that money on making working from home better and not having to have these big corporate offices that are a real drain on finances? Everything here is really centered on working from home. So it's important now to look at working from home and what that is in the UK. The ONS produced a survey, it's called the Annual Population Survey, and it questions the entirety of the population to work out how they behave. And this one is to do with what proportion of the population works predominantly from their house. and it's 5.1% of the whole population. Now, clearly the whole population includes people that work in manufacturing, in retail, in leisure, in hospitality, jobs which can't be done from home. So if we're looking just at the kind of sectors that would occupy offices, it's not that easy to do from the ONS numbers, but it's about 11 or 12% of the population of office-based workers predominantly work from their house, by which I would say that means more than 3 days a week. Now, it's not that important what the overall number is. What's really important is the kind of people that do it. And other than the age split, which is what you see here, there's a couple of interesting findings. So a lot of the people who say that they predominantly work from their house state that their job title is managing director. What I take this to mean is that the numbers are being pushed up by self-employed people. So it's one-man band accountants or management consultants, self-employed people in those kind of industries. And whilst self-employment is a massive part of the economy, quite frankly, for people providing services like catering or for people who are trying to buy and lease office buildings, we're not particularly interested in that portion of the economy. What we're more interested in is the kind of big corporates who, for example, run graduate programs. And graduate programs is a big part of the corporate world. Corporates occupy big offices need services. This is why it's important. And if you look at the age split, it's quite clearly the over 60s that are pushing up this average. And when you come down to I like to point out the 20 to 24-year-old age bracket, because that's your new young graduate age group, they don't work from home. So it's only 1.5% of those people. They don't work from home. They don't want to work from home. And to a large extent, they can't work from home. And there's several reasons for this. And I'm sure that you're all relatively familiar with this. And we conducted a survey. It was in 2016, but the results have proven pretty accurate. 79% of millennials that we surveyed considered the quality and location of workplace is important when they're selecting a job. And that's how the market has played out. So office markets across the UK, the type of offices that big companies want are all about that talent recruitment and retention. So the war for talent agenda. And with respect to those on the call that are over 60, when we're talking about the war for talent, we're not talking about the war for talent over 60, we're talking about the war for talent of those younger people. And those younger people want to be in the office for social reasons. So people will leave university, go to a big city from across the world and across the country, and they don't necessarily have a social network intact. And we've seen a real merging in recent years between social life and work life. So social element is really important. Going out for lunch, going out for drinks, hopefully not at lunchtime, but after work, and meeting friends and building that network is really, really important. Also for these graduates, this is the formative stage of their career. CBRE obviously has a really big graduate program, dozens of graduates being taken on every year. It's pretty difficult to run those graduate programs when you have 2,000 employees working from 2,000 different locations. In the formative stage of these people's careers, they need to be learning, they need to be around not just their other graduate colleagues, but a lot amongst their more senior colleagues as well. So being in the workplace is of crucial importance to young graduates, therefore to big corporates and to office demand. There is another quite important structural reason why young people tend not to want to work from home, and that's because of the way that they live. And this is from the 2011 census. And what it shows is the proportion of under 35s who live in a shared house. That's in the dark green bars. And across a variety of these different cities, the numbers are upwards to around 40%. So we have around 40% of under 35s who live in a shared house. The reason why I'm picking this out as a measure of not being able to work from home is I just feel that that's true. You will have heard stories, I'm sure, of people living in shared accommodation, working from home 4 or 5 people all crowded around one kitchen table doing these Zoom calls just doesn't work. Now, this is from the 2011 census, which was a long time ago. The next census isn't due to take place in 2021. But in that period, house prices have increased a lot and wages have effectively stagnated. So I would now be unsurprised if the latest figure for this is not up to 40%, but above 50%. And it's not just the younger people that are doing this. If you look on the house share websites, people of much older ages are now starting to house share as the affordability of housing has gone down, especially in cities such as London, or Bristol is another good example of this. So structurally, the younger people don't want to work from home. Now, if I take a slight step back here, however, and just consider what the likelihood is in the future, I do think there will be more people on aggregates working from home in the future than there was historically. So in 2019, which is what the figure was, it was 5.1%. In 2008, it was 3.5%. In percentage terms, that's quite a big increase. And that increase was going on anyway. And it's a pretty, not very much spoken about part of work life, but remote working has been really quite important for quite a number of years and was expected to grow anyway. It is likely that the growth will be accelerated by COVID for obvious reasons, such as people previously didn't used to do it and now they've made the investment in the technology. Companies may have had to have adjust their policies in order to allow it. So there will be an increase and it will be accelerated. So instantly then you're imagining that my estimation is that office usage will fall because I'm acknowledging the number of people who need to go into the office in the future will be lower than it was historically. At this stage, I think I just want to show something which is, in my opinion, pretty interesting. And at the moment, I've been concentrating on the people who have been working permanently or predominantly from home. But a regular question at this stage is, we're not necessarily just talking about people permanently working from home, but people who work from home occasionally or working more flexibly. What this chart shows is a variety of countries. Interestingly, the relationship for the UK is not as strong, but for the rest of the world, it is slightly more important, showing the number of people who occasionally work from home between 2002 and 2019, so 2 different time points. And you can see the shift here. Similar to the previous stat, there's been a structural shift over that 17-year period, where, for example, in France, 2% of people work flexibly in 2002, and it rose to 16% in 2019. And the rises are pretty similar across the board. But at the same time, as shown in the green boxes on the right, the amount of office space in those countries has increased significantly. So if you look at Ireland, 6% of people work flexibly in 2002, 13% in 2019, but there is now 62% more space than there was in 2002. And so the reason why I'm concentrating on people who work from home permanently or predominantly is I don't really see that there's a link between flexible working and demand for office space. And going back to what I was previously saying to do with aggregate office demand, there will be more people working from home. Some job functions will move entirely out of the office. But another point about office utilization, which seems to be an orthodox thought, is that the way that we occupy space will change. And what the chart shows is occupational density. So the amount of space each employee is allocated. And you can see over the most recent decade, square foot per employee has ramped up significantly over time, so decreased significantly over time. And for sure, in the office I sit in, you can see this happen. We are now effectively sitting 4 people to a 3-person desk, and this is pretty standard. We conducted a survey of our occupiers immediately post-lockdown, 46% of whom said that they intend to occupy space less densely in the future than they do currently. Now, if we apply a little bit of license to what this means and say that if they go back in time 5 years in terms of space densities and start occupying space back at 2015 levels of space density, across the markets that I'm analysing here, which just for reference is central London plus the big 6 regions, so Glasgow, Edinburgh, Birmingham, Bristol, Manchester, Leeds, that very small tweak in office densities would require an additional 29 million square feet of space just to accommodate that. Now, 29 million square feet of space is more than exists in both Leeds and Manchester combined. So the point of this is you would have to have a hell of a big increase in the number of people working from home permanently to make up for the entirety of office stock in Leeds and Manchester as an increase that would be made from this small tweak. Now, again, you could take a more cynical point of view about this. You could say I have a vested interest. You could say that my point about flexible working actually will decrease the amount of space people need. You could also say it's all well and good for CBRE's client base to tell us that they seek to de-densify, but during a cyclical downturn, are they really going to be taking more space than they need? Money is a big thing at the moment. And you could say of the existing occupier base, occupational footprint will fall, so fewer offices will be open. There's one way of looking at it, but you can't just view the existing occupier footprint and say that's the entire market. And without going into too much depth on this slide, since 2018, new entrants to the market, and this is just central London data because this is where we collect the best data for, since 2018, new entrants have represented 42% of all office transactions in London. So concentrating just on the existing occupier base doesn't tell you the full story about likely future occupation of offices. Office markets grow, dynamic office markets grow, and the UK cities are pretty dynamic office markets, and they adapt, and they've got the talent pool, and different companies want to be there. Now, looking further back than this chart, if we were to see what the position was post-financial crisis, a lot of financial companies lowered their footprint significantly. That wasn't bad news for the London office market. There wasn't structurally less space occupied as a result of that. What happened was someone else came in and took their place. I mean, it's difficult to predict who it will be in the future. Then it was really the big tech companies. In the future, who knows? I mean, we can have a guess. On the left, we have the big tech companies. So European footprint of the FANGs, so Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. And as you can see, they occupy a lot more space in London than they do in the rest of Europe. So it's a pretty strong story for UK office markets. And it's not just about London, this story. These big tech companies are starting now to take space all over the country. So the big tech companies, really well established here. It's a pretty fair guess that if you're looking at where future economic growth is going to come from, it'll be around one of these big companies, and they'll be taking more space. It's a fair bet. The picture in the top right represents life sciences, and life sciences is not a particularly big office occupier in UK markets at the moment, but you can be almost sure it will be in the future. We wrote a report in 2017 that identified life sciences, so pharma, those kind of companies, as the next big driver of office demand in the UK. And that's going to be more true in the future than it was historically. The bottom right represents the fintech industry, actually. And the reason why I've included the fintech industry as a potential source of office demand in the future is because it is growing. So it's interesting in of itself, but also just as an example of a brand new industry. And if we were sitting 10 years ago thinking about who's going to be taking office space that goes vacant because some other industry has started to struggle, nobody would have mentioned fintech because it didn't exist. So this is, again, an important point to recognize that just looking at existing occupiers who may come out with news stories saying that they intend to lower their occupational footprint is not necessarily the best way of analyzing what's going on. There are a couple of additional factors just concentrating specifically on non-central London office markets, so on regional cities and other places. And there are a couple of additional drivers, and we're pretty positive about the prospects for regional office markets, actually. There are two things which are likely to boost occupational growth there. So some of the occupiers in London looking to cut costs will move operations to lower cost office locations. So nearshoring, there's a few examples of that quite recently. So that will happen. These happen during cyclical downturns, which we're going through at the moment. And there's also the story about public sector. So public sector office demand cannot be understated. And as the chart shows, public sector has represented very large proportions of office space takes at very different periods of time. So looking at 2017, around 2 million square feet of space was taken by the public sector. This will restart at some point. If you look at the government's levelling up strategy and their calls, I mean, the picture on the right shows the House of Lords. The suggestion was that that could move to York. I don't think that that actually is going to happen now, but public sector, nearshoring, there are additional factors that will benefit regional office markets. So just to finish off that first section, I won't cover the conclusion and the summary in too much detail as to not take up too much time. But effectively, we acknowledge there will be an increase in the number of people working from home, but that won't be driven by younger people. And the war for talent agenda really is what pushes companies. Even if there is a lowering of the number of people coming to work, we think the impact of de-densification could actually either counteract those impacts or completely override them. The third point is that even if we're wrong about this and occupational densities don't reduce and demand for office space falls significantly, that's just a comment on the existing occupier base. Dynamic office markets grow, new entrants come in, and new industries start up. Now, just the final portion on this, and I'll just spend a few minutes on this, running out of time a little bit, and it's looking at what we think is likely to happen with the way that offices look and feel post-COVID. And the way I've done this is really split it up into three different things. The first is changes to office usage that would not have occurred if it wasn't for COVID-19. The second is to do with acceleration of existing trends. And the third is to do with tech. So firstly then, looking at changes that could happen that wouldn't have happened without COVID. The first one is to do with toilet provision. And we were starting to move away from the concept of superloos, the rooms that are basically unisex with a toilet in them, because bluntly, women didn't really like sharing toilets with men, and we're moving back towards cubicles. The thought is that it's possible that superloos will look more attractive in the future because they could be perceived as slightly more hygienic and easier to clean. The second on the right, and probably quite important for you, is amenity space within the building. So either client meeting rooms or cafes or restaurants within the building. I'm talking mostly about multi-let tower buildings here. There's an idea that they could be moved away from the flashiest part of the building, so the top of the tower, to perhaps the ground floor. Now, the reason why this would be done is perhaps the anxiety about spreading germs throughout the building. You don't want strangers coming in and just cutting down the amount of people going in. Moving them to the ground floor is a way of stopping that happening. But the reason why I think this will sustain, even when attitudes towards strangers' germs has gone back to normal, is I think this could be quite a nifty solution, especially to the areas of the building that might have been dedicated to retail, which, as we know, is a pretty struggling industry. So I think that that could sustain, moving the amenity space from the top of the building down to the ground floor. We talk about this as moving from airside to landside using an airport analogy. The third point is to do with lift provision, and during the lockdown and the return to office environment, because of social distancing rules, some offices have not been able to open because their lifts don't allow for social distancing, because there's too many floors and not enough lifts. Now, I don't think social distancing will go on forever, But this experience will have scarred some occupiers, and they will be thinking about lifts forever now. So more lifts, better lifts, bigger lifts, that could be a design in the future. The final point is to do with antibacterial surfaces, and either surfaces made out of materials that don't transmit virus or infection, or treating them with something that stops the transmission of virus or bacteria. It's quite a minor thing. I think even in the future, this will sustain, not because people will forever be scared of touching surfaces, but because I don't see any reason why this would reverse. It seems like a pretty minor thing, and I don't see where the driver would be ever to go back to surfaces that do transmit viruses and bacteria. So these are pretty minor changes that I think about as a new normal, and cost-wise, I don't see them as particularly significant. What I do see as significant is the change that was happening to office use anyway, that will be accelerated by COVID. And most of these things are to do with wellness and ESG, so environment, social, and governmental. And these were massive changes that we're seeing, and COVID will accelerate these things. A few things that are worth pointing out: so staircases, so they're making stairs more prominent within offices, so that's good for people's health because they're walking up and down them. That will be accelerated by COVID because of that issue to do with lifts that I was talking about. Cycling facilities and showers, will start to see more and more of those things in office buildings. They were already really important, but in the office of the future, because in the return to office, more people have got used to cycling to work because they don't want to go on public transport. That would be more important. And then this idea about the office as the collaborative hub, that's really an important thing. It's not really to do with wellness and ESG, but the design of offices has moved away from just being rows and rows and rows of desks, and having more collaboration space is more important. There's a couple of additional things on the left there. So opening windows is a potential thing in the future. And then also, for example, biophilia, so more plants within offices. So a better, healthier offices. So the idea I'm trying to portray here is we are seeing a new normal in the way offices are used. It's just that it's not being caused by COVID. It will be accelerated by COVID. And it's the creation of something better than there was before. The final point is to do with tech, and I'm not going to cover this in very much detail, but we think that there are some small specific COVID-related issues that can be fixed with building tech. And we think there'll be the widespread adoption of building tech across the industry. And there are all sorts of things, so desk utilization sensors, desk booking systems, meeting room booking systems, wayfinding apps, air quality sensors, air filtration systems, that will all be adopted because of very small, specific COVID-related issues. For example, social distanced offices, you need to book a desk, so that needs a desk booking system. During the lockdown, air conditioning systems were cut off. There's a risk of Legionnaire's disease, so you need to monitor that. So the adoption of tech because of some small COVID-related issues will give a lot of long-term benefits, not least the aggregation and integration of all of these systems, which make buildings function better. And to very, very quickly summarize, because I think I've actually run over time now, just thinking about this dark, bold section in number 3 there. We start off at the very beginning of the presentation, looking at all of those sensationalist headlines about the death of the office. The first section, I've tried to show that I don't think working from home is necessarily the thing that will kill offices. I think there's evidence to suggest that flexible working is actually good for offices. And even if more people work from home, the economy grows, more industries come in. And I also think that because of COVID, we will accelerate the adoption of some pretty good things. So in the future, as a result of COVID, the way that offices look and are designed will be better. People will function better in them, they'll be more productive. The economy will be better because of acceleration of changes. So rather than the death of the office, what I like to describe this as the moment of when the office improves. So the birth of a better office rather than the death of the office. And that is the final slide I have.
Simon, thank you so much. That's absolutely fabulous and a great place to finish. Not the death of the office, but like you say, the birth of a better office. I think it's fair to say that for many, sometimes, you know, the office wasn't a great place, but if we are moving forward more positively, that's wonderful. I'd love to just bring Graham on. He has got a great panel of operators that we are looking forward to hearing from. So Graham, over to you.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks, Simon, as well. I think, you know, hearing about how, you know, the future might change for offices. Obviously, it's such a hugely important kind of revenue line for our industry, and you know, it's very depressing to see the quiet streets of London and people almost you know, kind of evacuating the city last night as lockdown was imposed. Then, you know, I think there is a clamour to be able to return to normality and connection with teams, which I think we'll be back there, and hospitality does play an important role, I think, in being able to, you know, differentiate that experience from working from home to working in the office with team members. So very fortunate to have an excellent panel for you now. And on that, I'd like to welcome Dean Kennett from Fooditude. He's the owner and founder of that business, a very tech-focused food service company. We have Wendy Bartlett, founder and CEO of Bartlett Mitchell, the renowned B&I caterer, and recently merged with WSH. And also Alistair Richards, the COO at CH&Co. He joined CH&Co through the merger with Gather and Gather, and CH&Co, a very successful business backed by the private equity firm Equistone. So great to have the panel on there, and I'd just like to start off really just casting people's minds back to the first lockdown. Also, it's a huge disruption for the industry and for your own personal businesses. And it'd be great to hear, you know, when something like that happens, how did you ensure the survival of the business, which is essentially people's, you know, first concern when disruption of that scale hits. Wendy, perhaps I can come to you first with that question.
Well, when it first happened, obviously, I don't think any of us have done that before, so that's quite new for us as an experience. But I think as contract caterers, we're quite adaptable to emergencies, immediate changes, crisis. You know, I think we've done it all and we react quite quickly. So I think everyone just went into an auto mode of, right, got a problem, let's sort it out. And I mean, people have been incredible. And what Robin was saying about the team is so true. We call ourselves the BM family. And that really solidified for me. That was my best bit of the whole of this, was how everybody within Bartlett Mitchell just came together as one. It was all about making sure everyone was okay, staying connected, communicating, dealing with the clients' issues, and really giving them comfort, the clients and our team, and the customers, that we knew what we was doing and we could solve their problems. So, I mean, Francois, our MD, he actually said he quite enjoyed it because it was great, because we, you know, love a problem, solve the problem, and move, you know, get it sorted. So I think as characters, as businesses, I think we're quite well placed to deal with these sort of crises because we can adapt really quickly.
Thanks, Wendy. And Alistair, you know, you're involved in a business which is, you know, national in scale across, you know, multiple areas of the market. How was your experience of dealing with that crisis?
Look, I think we have to get the balance right when we talk about, you know, and I agree with both Robin and Wendy, and Wendy. In many instances, it's a privileged position to be in. But let's be really honest. I mean, it was really, really tough. It was really tough personally for businesses. It was tough for colleagues, and I think we were caught in the headlights. And I think if there's anything that's come out of this that we must make sure that we hold on to, it's the humility and transparency as leaders to show vulnerability, both personally and as businesses, because it makes us, frankly, more genuine. It makes us more human and more approachable. And it helps us both internally with our colleagues, but also with our clients and with our market to expect and demand transparency, honesty, and respect. And we've spoken earlier, Rob, when we posed the question about, you know, is a Minister for Hospitality a good idea? And I think everybody would agree that it is. This industry really needs to take from this a renewed sense of its value and place in our society. And I think having the humility and honesty to acknowledge that it was really tough, and every business, dependent on the way that businesses are corporately structured, as you said at the beginning, Graham, had slightly different challenges. And, you know, we've all had to make sure that the structural elements of our business are sound. So, you know, how did we react? What did we have to do? Well, we needed to make sure that financially the business was on a secure footing and negotiate the right provisions with lenders and those that support us. And we've been very fortunate in our business to do that quickly and successfully. But that in no way takes away the human impact of the fact that we've also had to continually make sure that we realign our cost base with our revenues, because to do so would frankly be irresponsible and would not ensure a safe and secure and growing business to welcome colleagues back to as things inevitably will improve. So it's been a real mixed bag, but I'm determined to acknowledge that it's been really tough, because, you know, there's been some laughs and some upsides in terms of the way we've worked together, but it's been a tough period, and we should acknowledge that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that whole piece of you know, having done this before, and, you know, being able to you know, admit that not everything's gone right, because everybody is, you know, kind of finding their way. You know, I think that certainly strikes a chord. And Dean, you know, you work in a very kind of tech focused you know, kind of business which has a slightly different approach. You know, do those themes chime with you in terms of how you had to adapt when the crisis hit?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, echoing what Alistair and Wendy have spoken about, I think because we run a central production unit, kitchen, so a lot of all our manpower is in one place. And I think when I sort of walked into the kitchen one day and there is no team there producing any food, that was a very stark moment for me to look at what was happening in the business and what was happening in the trade. It's very upsetting. I think the thing as a small business looking out to the bigger businesses like CH&Co, Sodexo, Compass, what was quite nice is that they openly shared their global view on what was happening, and that kind of almost that collaboration bit of sharing and understanding of a bit, you know, we're all in the same boat. And I think that openness was really quite well timed for us, and we certainly learned a lot from those bigger businesses.
And, you know, one thing, and I'm always impressed with in this particular industry, is that, you know, people do, you know, kind of value their teams, and you know, they are kind of cognizant of the, you know, the values that they show to them and demonstrate with them. But of course, as you said, you know, people have had to cut their costs to match their revenues, and you know, lose a lot of colleagues from the business. What I'm interested to understand is, you know, given that, and given that, you know, the expectation is that, you know, the market will come back, you know, this is a temporary public health crisis. How do you stay connected with your people when you've had to put so many on furlough, or even, you know, take the step to make them redundant? Wendy, do you want to pick up on that first? Because I know that you've done quite a lot in this area.
Well, obviously Bartlett Mitchell's got its own thing. We're keeping in touch with people that we've let go, and how all of us have had to do that. And we've, been very open and honest with the team, saying that, this is our situation at the moment. But the reason, and what has been my favourite bit of COVID actually, is that you have, and I'm a naturally optimistic person anyway, my favourite bit's been the way the industry has come together. And as you know, I sit on UK Hospitality Board, and I sit on the UK Forum for the food service groups, and that's all the contract catered. What has been absolutely brilliant is every single person we've approached and said, look, could you make sure you come onto this forum? Will you be part of this? Has done so. So I would say we probably have 90% of the turnover in our industry is now represented on that board. The second thing about it is that we created Food Service Circle, and we turned that round literally within about 4 weeks with the support of everybody on that forum, of every contract caterer. And what we've been able to do there is create a real place where people can go to once they leave the industry, and go off to be Amazon drivers probably at the moment, but they can come back to us, and we will stay connected and use that as a forum to really shine where food service sector is, because we know they absolutely love to be in that sector. Sorry, thank you. They love to be in that. Thank you, David.
HMRC code.
Yes, okay. Oh, okay. No, someone wants to use my phone. So the Food Service Circle has actually been a really great point of making sure that we've got a forum for staying in touch with everybody. So that's been really, really good. And so that, I don't think it's about how we as individual companies stay connected, it's how we all stay connected.
And Dean, is that I think with your customer base as well, it's quite tech focused. So if we think about those, kind of the FANG businesses as they're referred to, I know you count some of those amongst your clients. The process of kind of bringing people back as the demand from those particular clients came back. How was that process, and how was it to bring people back into the business?
Yeah, I mean, those that look after tech businesses as well will probably know that they were probably the first to move out of town, mainly because it was a global call. I think one of your talkers earlier talked about that. So we were kind of like, we almost had like a 6 to 8 week lead, unfortunate lead, where people just disappeared. And if you talk to those kind of clients now, a lot of them are not talking about coming back till at least the summer, bizarrely, but some of them are quite optimistic and more resilient and are looking forward to getting back into the workplace. So it's a real split. One of those clients is Netflix. They have quite an aggressive nature in them that they want to get back to work. So I think that's quite reassuring. And I think talking to some of these clients, at the moment, it's about bringing people back on a sort of stage level. I think people are talking about, the office won't be 100%, it will probably be 30, 40% to start with. It's actually to try and track those staff back in. And we talked about it, I know, the other day, this kind of the golden ticket approach to, well done, you can come back into the office today, you've won a day back at the office. Because a lot of the work is singular, it's done at home, it's quite intense. And when they come back into work, it'll be more of a kind of a collaborative shared experience where they can actually sort of offload, talk to their team members and have a bit of fun, and then sort of go back home again. I don't think it's going to be for every business, but these are the people that we talk to and what we see and the trends that are happening that they're being talked about.
And Alistair, one of the points raised there was about, perhaps that different framing of what it means to come back to the office. Obviously, you have a huge footprint across, kind of B&I in London and the kind of surrounding areas. What conversations, if any, are taking place yet with clients about how that return to the office might be different? In the post-COVID world compared to pre-COVID, all those, the concepts of, more collaborative space, or using the offices for different reasons. Is that happening yet? Are you seeing evidence of that with your clients?
Absolutely, and this is the really exciting bit, because I think you in your first piece talked about acceleration of trends, as did Robin, as did Simon, and really, if we're honest, what we're seeing is a shift in the way that offices are being used, and an acceleration of trends that we've already been dealing with, but it's happening in 6 months, whereas it may have taken years to crystallize in the way that we're addressing now. So, I mean, I agree with what's been said, though. I think clients are starting to increasingly realize that they have a latent problem, and that is that we've spent years across our industry working with informed clients who want to have food as part of their DNA, food and hospitality, and want also, in many instances, whether it's through subsidy or otherwise, to positively intervene in the kind of health, well-being, level of productivity, and their employer proposition, if you like, of coming to work. And clients aren't ready to simply wash their hands of that responsibility, because there is a temporary sort of handbrake that's been quite aggressively pulled on the way that people use the office. So we're working with clients to think about how people are going to use the office in the future, and if there is in aggregate going to be an increase in people working from home, and people therefore use the office on a more rotational or an activity-based reason, rather than simply just sit in a few square meters staring at a terminal. What does that mean for the way that we serve those customers? If you're coming together for more ad hoc team-based activities, then the way that we service, the way that you can pre-order, use technology, the way that food can be that sort of social glue becomes more and more important. So I think it's helping us to start to think about our customers in terms of their need states. If you're a habitual office user because it's required of you to be in the office every day, then what you need from us as a caterer or hospitality provider will necessarily be different from your needs if you come in a day a week or a couple of days a month. And so as caterers, our job in the way that we innovate is through pop-ups or through hospitality or through different ways to serve those customers. How do we make their experiences with food all the more positive when they do come into the office? So I just think it's fueling the pace of change and innovation. I know all of us on this call, whether it's Dean in his core business or Wendy's done her things in Bartlett Mitchell with delivery launches and all sorts of things. We've done stuff as an industry in 6 months that would have taken us years before. So that acceleration and pace of change is exciting. And our well-informed clients are coming to us actively thinking about how do we make sure that we don't lose the gains that we've all invested in over the years in our food programs, and how do we make sure we get those food programs out to our people wherever they're working, and that's exciting for us.
And it's I think a lot of this is it would be great if this all came to pass. I do have a concern though that that this development, the build a better office, and the changes in how people work, then at the point where it is safe to come back to the office and people really feel that the competitive spirits and the focus on cost and things like that will kind of natural business drivers, and will that squash some of this this kind of optimism? I don't know, Wendy, what do you think? How are you seeing your clients in terms of what changes they're willing to make?
No, I mean, there will be a blip, there's no doubt. They'll have a cost issue because, now they've got less people in, they'll have to remodel what they're doing in their office, not just with catering, with the whole thing. But, at the end of the day, people are social beings. At the end of the day, people do want to be together. So there is still going to be a need for catering in the future. It will be different, but it'll be fun, it'll be foodie, it'll be all those things we all love because we're all caterers at the end of the day. And we will make sure, all of us will make sure that we've got a product that fits whatever those clients' needs are. And the love of our industry is no two sites are the same. So some will struggle to get people back to the office and need them to go back to the office. So they'll have to work really hard, and catering's absolutely the thing to put forward to get those back in. And there's another part where companies will really want to make sure that they look after their teams, because, you know, it's okay saying we've got lots of people available now in that business or in, you know, for jobs, but in 2 years' time, I guarantee we'll all be talking again about how we don't have the right talent. We're going to lose all our chefs being delivery drivers, whatever they're going to be doing. So we've now then got to work really hard to get those back into our industry. And our clients will know that they will need to do better things in their offices to sustain relationship. Someone interestingly said to me that, you know, when you're dealing with a client and you're having a Zoom call, you have to remember that it's easy for everyone to have that Zoom call and it doesn't give you that personal connection. What you need to do, whether you're, you know, an area manager of a contract catering company or you're someone who's trying to get someone to invest millions, you need to have that face-to-face, really personal contact to create that relationship for the future. So there's always going to be a need for it. It will go down, costs will be a big issue. And then I believe the offices will then be thinking, oh, actually, we need to do something about it now because we've lost whatever it was. And now we need to work twice as hard. So I think it gives us really good opportunities.
And I guess one of the trends that we had seen before COVID was the rise of the delivered in food service provision. And obviously we'd seen the likes of kind of Just Eat investing in City Pantry. You know, delivery, certainly in the retail food space, with the likes of Deliveroo and Just Eat and Uber Eats, etc., has been a huge area of growth. You know, Dean, with your business, you know, you are providing that delivered in solution. How do you compete, if you like, with the might of a Just Eat or a Deliveroo, with the weight of funds they have behind them? How do you compete with such, you know, ferocious competition?
Well, I think we've always just done what we do, what I see is in front of us. I think clients generally are looking for almost like an umbrella of options now. So it's not just one set thing. I think there's a whole plethora of options available, whether it's Deliveroo or it's Uber Eats or you're a contract catering company and you have diversified into delivery. So I think there's lots of different options out there, and it's whether the client you're talking to is the right option for them. So I think trying to do too much, I think, just waters down what you're about. What we have done is, because we have our asset, which is the large CPU just outside of London, is we started looking at the B2C model, virtual platforms, and sort of extending our range and capabilities beyond the B&I sector, because obviously that just isn't there at the moment for us. So we're now looking at and talking to sort of restaurant partners, hotels, where we will do product backup to kitchens where they just can't afford to have full teams anymore. And there's some conversations with other contract caterers where we can back up some of their food needs when they're stuck in a spot. So we have that's been launched literally this week as well, and that's actually starting to gain some traction. So I think, you know, we're just bending and twisting to what's in front of us. I think long term, I think if you've got some options that you can use is good. But again, you know, I think the exciting bit is, I think everyone else has alluded to, that there are some things that will suddenly just arrive through people that have been made redundant, or you know, new creatives come into the market, and it is a time of massive change. And I think embracing it rather than running away from it is our mantra. We want to try to almost kind of host some of that innovation within our team or people we know in the business to actually use for better use. And if we find something that's working, you know, I'm talking to lots of what would normally be our competitors, but sharing ideas is a must right now, because nobody wants to play a game of rugby on their own. You want to play on the field with your team and players, So that's our view.
And Alistair, with CH and Co, the new investment from private equity not too long ago, as you've headed into this crisis and looking at the re-emergence, has technology become more important when you think about your future business? And are there any particular areas where you see that having the biggest impact?
Well, I mean, given the comments that Dean and Wendy have also made about the long-term need that we see for delivery as part of a sort of a suite of services, both B2C and kind of B2B2C ultimately. Absolutely, technology becomes the sort of linchpin of enabling that. So we've certainly accelerated development of apps, pre-ordering, all sorts of stuff that was already in the business, but we've sort of ramped up efforts to make sure that it's got capacity and capability to do what it needs to do. So, I mean, I think the interesting thing is that if we look at our business before COVID and the way that the apps and pre-ordering and loyalty and prepayment and nutritional data and all that stuff was being utilized within our B&I estate, I think our highest levels of adoption in any one contract, which happened to be a tech organization in a large national nil-cost contract, was about 45% app usage in terms of ordering and payment. But outside of that particular example, adoption levels were still, whilst they were growing in percentage points materially year on year as a percentage of total transactions, they were still relatively low. I think the interesting thing is, it's like anything, without wanting to sort of be trite, necessity breeds invention. People are now having to use technology as consumers, and therefore we see those adoption rates escalating. So it's just incumbent on us to make sure that what we provide people with is slick, it works. And I think we're all making it across the entire industry. We're all making huge efforts to make sure we're up to speed.
Thanks, Alistair. And turning now to my favourite topic, M&A. Wendy, you recently merged the business with WSH, and I know as an owner of a business, and as many people feel, that a great responsibility to kind of your teams and the brand and the business itself. Leaving aside kind of the commercial aspects of the transaction, what was it that led you to take that decision and decide that was the route forward for the business?
Well, funnily enough, WSH have never approached me before, and I only started the business because Bill Baxter told me to. We were on a walk with his family. He said I ought to start one, so I did. So he rang me and then said, Wendy, I think you should seriously think about it, because he's always telling me to have an exit plan, of which I swear to you, I really didn't have one. And I thought about it, and the reason that I did it was, to be honest, WSH, I was saying to the team this morning, it's like going back to work for Sutcliffe, because I come from Sutcliffe, they all come from Sutcliffe. So to be honest, we all work the same way anyway, because we were all brought up in Sutcliffe. And Alistair Story and Bill Baxter was my bosses anyway in the past. And I just thought, well, I'm fantastic with people and team. I mean, fantastic in that I love it. That's what I love doing. I love food, love my team, love everything else. I wouldn't say I'm great at running a business, because Alistair, in his period of time, has got to 800 million. I got to my, whatever it was, 50, 60 million. I know that's okay, but actually that's more because my team are brilliant rather than me being a business person. And in the next 2 years, it's going to be quite tough, and I know that. So I thought, in terms of our best chance to keep Bartlett Mitchell, the essence of what it is, and be able to grow it for the future back to where it was pre our turnover diving, that being part of that WSH branding, as a food opportunity, probably would give me more tools within the kit bag that we've got to create more opportunities for my team. And the thought for me of my team 5 years battling to go back to where we were originally, their career opportunities, the security, you don't know what's going to happen in the next 18 months. All of us don't know. So I just thought it was better for all of us. And actually, for me personally, it's quite a bit like a bit of a refresh for me personally, because I get to do the things that I really love in the business. And it's not like people don't know what I'm like. They do. I'm, obviously nice, all those sort of easy to work with, not opinionated. So it's not like they don't know what I'm like to work with. And the fact that they've said, look, I have to stay around for 3 years means that they know how bad I'm going to be. So it's pretty much Bartlett Mitchell or, whatever it would be. Actually, I was going to change the name bizarrely just before all this happened, because saying Bartlett Mitchell and typing it is a bit of a pain in the butt. And we call ourselves BM all the time. We never use Bartlett Mitchell internally. So that's why I did it, really. It just seemed the right time. It got done in 2 or 3 months. It had nothing to do with turnover. It had everything to do with what we could add to their business, what they can add to our business. And it was a meeting of minds, to be honest, and that's the truth. And I know everyone always says they're not going to keep it around, but I haven't got anything else to do, so I'll have to stay just to irritate them all, if nothing else.
Thanks, Randy. Alistair, just on that topic as well, the story of CH&Co has been one of a series of successful mergers, which has created the platform that you've got today. And obviously, you've been through one of those processes with CH&Co and stayed on as Wendy has promised to do. When you look forward and look over the next 2 years, do you see a return to the the M&A trail for CH&Co?
Well, I think the first thing to say is I think the announcement of Wendy's union with Alistair and Noel and the team was incredibly heartening for all of us. It demonstrates value that private equity backers still see in our UK market, and we've certainly felt that through the level of support that we continue to enjoy at CH&Co. It demonstrates confidence in businesses and confidence in our industry to recover and deliver value. So I don't think anyone in the sector would feel anything other than, really heartened by that news and wish that new union sort of every success, because that helps all of us. I think look, my job in CH&Co, having sort of come in through the Gather and Gather acquisition, was always to take that business and to help it to deal with its integration challenges that inevitably happen when you go through a series of M&A, and to make sure that what the business as a collection of brands that have been brought together over years and integrated successfully to a point, what they offer now as a collective group is easy to understand, both internally and externally. So there's lots of great work to do, and rather like Robin, I took my COO role on. Actually, I was on pat leave as we went into lockdown, and I came back into my new job. So it's been an interesting time, but the biggest focus within our group is about organic growth and about turning the very many brilliant things that have been done through owner proprietor businesses coming together into something that the market understands a little bit more clearly than perhaps it did historically. Is there opportunity for further M&A within our market? Well, I do think, along with everyone else, that there will be a fairly major recalibration of our market in 2021, 22 and beyond. Will that lead to further M&A opportunities? I think inevitably. Is it route one of our strategy at the moment? No. Does that mean while there's breath in certain people's body that if there isn't the right deal to be had, it won't be considered? It'd be disingenuous to say no, right? So it's not core strategy route one, but I think, as I've said, we're confident in the market, and that means that the right tie-ups and the right unions will always be considered if we've got the financial bandwidth to do it.
So, so if someone does approach me and ask me to help them, you know, find a new home, a new partner for their business, I should still pick up the phone to Bill then, yeah?
I'm sure he'd be personally gutted if you didn't, but whether anything came of it, I couldn't possibly comment.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Listen, really appreciate you know, the time, Wendy, Dean, Alistair. I've certainly found that to be really insightful, and appreciate the, you know, kind of the candid responses that you've provided there, and your time as well. So thank you very much. I'll hand back to Chris now, just to wrap up.
Thanks, Graham. I think that was a fascinating session, the last 2 hours. Absolutely some great input. So firstly, thanks to all our speakers, who I think have been exceptional today. I think it's great to see a road out. So I think Graham set off the day with a very interesting presentation, talking about really a return in 2022, and obviously some of the dynamics going on, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. I really enjoyed Robin's presentation, which really did show that just the role the industry as a whole can play over the next 2 years as well. Simon's presentation, I think, is actually something that's been on our minds particularly. And actually the idea of a rebirth of the office, I think, is key as well. And I love the candor of the panel. So many thanks to all our presenters today and our panelists today for their input. If I just one quick request to them before we finish, please have a look at the Q&A. If you want to answer anyone directly, please do. I'm sure the people asking questions will be very much appreciative of that. But my main thanks is to the audience. Thank you for joining us today. Very much appreciated. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have, and enjoy the rest of the day. I promise to be finishing by about 11 o'clock, but literally just gone past that. But thank you for joining us, and any comments, please, always delighted to hear. But enjoy the rest of the day, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chris, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Wendy.